Okay, good afternoon, ladies. Good to be here again. And as Mara is handing out some handouts, we will not be able to cover all this material, but some of it is for you to take with you, review. It's really, it's something that I normally do in about 2.5 or 3 hour sessions. So I condensed it down. I'm going to cover certain things today that I hope will be a help to you and really motivate maybe or give you a basis on something that on your own you can take and review. This is not something you can do one time through and really get all you need from it. Anytime a speaker speaks on something like this practical, we have a lot in our heads and we've had a long time to think about it and prepare it. In the case of this, probably been working on this for maybe almost 10 years. So it's hard to convey in one session concisely what would really be helpful. I do really appreciate moms, and I say that sincerely. Of course, I had a mom, and my wife has been a great mom through the years, and it always amazes me what ladies can do. I could talk about all kinds of characteristics, but we don't have time for that this morning. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and trust that this will be helpful to you. What we're talking about, finances and how to teach. That means wait. So when do I know when to start? So we're talking about finances in a sense, and mainly about how to teach children what real prosperity looks like. In this day of inflation that we're experiencing and all kinds of issues, how many of you, and I'm sincerely asking this, it might sound like a question that has an obvious answer, but how many of you are, let's say, not just affected, but seriously affected by where prices and cost and inflation is? So what better time to take a look at how we can deal with some of this? And I wish I had time to talk about what the future may hold in that area, but we don't. But in Proverbs chapter 30, verses 7 through 9 is kind of the theme verse for me and when I teach on finances. But it says, 2 things have I required of thee, deny me them not before I die. Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me, lest I be full and deny thee, and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal, and take the name of my God in vain. The key to that, you can study that for yourself sometime, but the key to that is feed me with food convenient for me. What you know, Lord, that I need. In other words, supply. Give me, in our today modern language, give me the financial situation that is best for me. And if this is the parents in the home, and especially the father in the home, and if he is a leader, Lord, give me what we need best for our family. And God does that for each family. Now, we can get ourselves in messes on our own, but God gives us what we need. We have to learn how to work with that. So that's what's going to be the theme of this, especially as we get down a little bit further here in just a little bit. So, as I have an introduction on the handout, many areas of life need to be taught to children, obviously. And we do reasonably well with some of them. Some of them we don't do so well. And finances is one area that we don't do so well with. Now, here's the thing, ladies, this is just a fact. That doesn't mean this percentage is true of this particular group. But overall, if you look at the United States of America, only about 25% of people know how to handle finances well. This comes from financial advisors. This comes from all kinds of statistics. It is just a fact. So now, like I said, those percentages don't necessarily reflect here. I don't know, because I don't know you. But if that were true, that would mean only what? About 5 or 6 of you, or 7, know how to handle finances properly. Now, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying think of those percentages. But it really isn't hard, because it's common sense. And this is an area, this is not the only area that humans love to reject common sense. I learned a long time ago as a pastor, teacher, counselor, that people don't necessarily use their common sense. So this is an area we need to really look at, and it's critical, and not to understand it can bring unwanted consequences in our lives and in the lives of our children. So I encourage you to regularly review this, think about these tools that I present in a little bit, and that'll help you keep on track. And I really mean it when I say, I have my email at the top, and if you have some specific questions or something you need cleared up, whatever it might be, I'm glad for you to email me, and I'll acknowledge the email, and then as quickly as I can, I'll get back with you with an answer, and I'd be glad to do that. Well, first of all, you say, how can I help my children to prosper? Well, parents must be an example. Now, you've heard that a few times, right? But in this matter of finances, it is so true. You have to be an example in it before them. It would be very difficult to teach a child good financial principles and sense if you don't practice it, because that's just what they see. And we want good examples before our children. We want their teachers to be good examples, their pastors, our relatives, older siblings, and even their friends if possible. But the most important example in the child's life is the parent. Does that make sense? So moms, you need to understand and apply what I share with you today. And this is not just for me. If you go to any financial advisor, any kind of reputable financial advisor, if you go to any pastor that understands finances, if you go to anybody that understands finances, they're going to concur with what I'm telling you today. This is not just coming from me. So children must be also taught self-discipline. We'll talk about some of those ways as we go through this. You'll kind of have to pick up on it and go back and review on this. But Proverbs 21:17, I'm going to read that to you real quickly because I'm going to refer to it again. Proverbs 21:17 says, "He that loveth pleasure shall be a poor man. He that loveth wine and oil shall not be rich." Now, in the Old Testament times, oil was a sign of prosperity. It cost a lot of money, and the type of oil it's referring to here, and even any kind of drink or whatever that was special. You know, back in those times, they just didn't have access to a lot like we do today, which is one of the problems we have today because we're in such an affluent country, and just things are all around us. And so I had one of our young staff members at Indiana Baptist College recently told me, because he was working on some of my handouts for another workshop I was doing, and he said Proverbs 21:17 made a huge difference in his life as a young man, back as a teen, as he began to realize that, and it's what you set your heart on. But we really have a problem with self-discipline in our day, because there are so many ways to get around discipline because of our culture, and again, because of our affluent society. But teach your children to restrain themselves. I'm not talking about in just money and everything, in everything. As a matter of fact, one thing that would be good for parents to practice is practice saying no, even if they don't have to say no. And a child needs to understand there are some things that they just don't necessarily, they shouldn't just have everything they want. You say, well, I can't think of a good reason. Well, I can think of a good reason, self-discipline. They don't need everything they want. And I could say a lot more on that, but we don't have the time. But then children must be taught the principles of earning, spending, and saving. And this results in them learning responsibility, and we'll see some of that as we go through. Then they need to be able to visualize spending and saving. Let them see what they're saving, and let them see what they're spending. Now, this is not my idea, but I thought it was a good idea. Somebody said use a glass jar instead of a piggy bank. So if they see their money in the glass jar that they're saving, and then they go in and take it out, and they see, okay, that dollar bill's gone. Just for an example, what if they had a dollar bill and some change? They'd say, you're going to spend $1 on something, you take that out, well, my dollar's gone. And mom and dad are not going to replace it. You have to save it. And so they see it's gone. You wouldn't have to use a glass jar, but you do need to demonstrate to them, okay, you're taking this, so this is gone. So now you only have this left. And the same thing when they spend it, they see what they're spending. When they're spending something, you say, okay, you're going to buy this, so that means you can't buy that because you're not going to have enough money now to buy this. And so it's just that seems very simple, but they need to be taught that. They don't necessarily think that way. Remember, they've watched you use checkbooks and credit cards, and they think that it's endless, and they don't think. It's like a funny thing. Yesterday at noon at the college, we had some children eating there too. One of the families, and one of them's aunt said, "Okay, well, shouldn't you ask your mom, or should you be doing that now?" And he said, "Mom didn't say anything." She said, "Well, she said something yesterday that still applies today." That's the way children think, Well, nobody told me not to today. And so that's why they have to have things demonstrated to them. They have to have it reinforced because they're not developed in their thinking like we are. And besides that, they want to ignore it. So sometimes. And so they need to earn money and to save money. I'm big on children having chores to do around the house. And they should be taken seriously too. Followed through, they should do them. That goes back to that self-discipline. That goes back to that idea, I need to earn what I'm doing. And also I just need to do a good job. So when they get into a job of their own, they do a good job. They can do odd jobs. They can do real jobs when they're teens or even preteens. I have a 12-year-old grandson down in Alabama that started his own business, and he's making some money. And it's legit, and people are using him in yard care and other things. And so we have a number of students that attend our college that in their teen years, they saved enough money to pay for 1 or more years of college when they came. We have others that come and they save nothing. And in a lot of those instances, the parents didn't even work on them saving something. So they need to earn, they need to save, and train them not to impulse spend. Now some of this stuff's just peppered in here, like you say, how did you get that there? Well, it popped in my mind, so I put it in. Okay, teach them not to impulse spend. That's very important. The best, and that's for all of us. A good policy is just to say, okay, let me wait a day and see if I feel the same way about this tomorrow that I felt today. Many times a child won't even think of it again, maybe, until they see it sometime. Because on the impulse, children just they would spend on impulse all the time, most kids. Then you have some children that have a natural tendency to save their money. That's good, but many don't. So anyway, then they know if that's an item they really wanted, and if it's an item they really want. But teach them those disciplines, those self-disciplines, and those principles. because they need to know those things. And then teach them contentment. 1 Timothy 6:6 says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. And so we your family, listen to this closely, it's very important. Your children should never feel like your family is poor. Ever. And honestly, they should never feel like you don't have enough money. You said, but wait a minute, sometimes we don't have enough money. That's not the way to look at it. If you don't literally have enough money, then you just say, we're asking God to meet our needs. Don't be talking about we don't have enough money or we're poor. Our older daughter, some of you know Alicia, when she was younger, there were times when we didn't know where next week's groceries were coming from. Now, she didn't know that, but she did know we had need of things that we didn't necessarily buy right away. And my wife asked her one time when she was older, did you ever feel like we were poor? She said, oh no, that never entered my mind that we were poor. Or that even we didn't have enough money. See, you don't lay on children something that they can't handle or do anything about. You know. Now, I'm not saying be ridiculous, but I mean, in the sense that we tell people, we tell our children we can't afford that, or we can't afford that right now. That's good language to use. We've not chosen to put our money there. We need to put our money here. You see, and that's teaching them principles day by day, week by week, month by month. So teach them contentment, to be happy with what they have. Teach them to give. I'm going to read you a scripture that just really jumped out at me a few months ago like it never has before. As a matter of fact, I didn't even think of it in this context. Ephesians 4:28 says, now Paul, the Apostle Paul here, is speaking about people, adults, who recently accepted the Lord, who recently became Christians. And so in Ephesus, it was a very immoral and undisciplined place. And so when they got saved, they didn't know. You know, when a person first gets saved, they don't always know what's right and wrong. They've been living a certain way, so they don't know. So Paul said, let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands, the thing which is good, that he may have to provide for his own needs. Is that what that says? It doesn't say that. Wait, read it there. It says that he may have to give to him that needeth. Now, honestly, I'm a preacher. I've been studying the Bible a long time, and I think always when I read that, I never caught that. That he said, he that's been stealing to meet his needs, don't steal anymore, but work hard and make money so you can have to help those who have needs. Isn't that interesting? You would think he would say, stop stealing to meet your needs, work to meet your needs. But that isn't what he said. Now that's implied here. Obviously, he means take care of your family too. But you see the thinking that we need to have. Biblical thinking is part of the reason God is that has entrusted me as a steward of his money is that I may help others. Then that just changes our thinking in all sorts of ways. It keeps us from indulging in things sometimes that we really don't need and probably really won't enjoy as much as we thought we would enjoy it. So just some things to think about and warn them about debt. Proverbs 22:7 tells us that the borrower is servant to the lender. Is that not true? The credit card companies have really got something going, but we cooperate. So, and I'm not against carrying credit cards. I know some financial advisors are also, but if you're responsible with it, I have a credit card. But we never have a balance. We never carry over a balance. But anyway, when we are in debt, we are servant to whoever we are in debt to. Just that simple. And sometimes that's not a bad thing for a house mortgage, and sometimes for a car, but But even there are some things we can talk about that might help you out. So warn them about debt. Someone said that we have, in America, we have the most sophisticated form of slavery in the world. We become enslaved to our system of credit cards, buying on credit, overspending in this affluent society. It's tough. It's harder. I would say it's harder to live in some ways in an affluent society than it would be in some of the third world countries. Now, I don't want to switch with them. Don't misunderstand me. But you see what I'm saying in this area of finances. Children must be taught what real riches are. A joyful life marked by good relationships with those you know and love. That's rich. That's being rich. The blessings of God on your life because you put Him first.
That's right.
In Matthew 6:33. Those are riches. God says, seek you first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. He was talking about our needs and necessities earlier in the passage, is what he's referring to. But God, in other places in the scriptures, we know that He does meet many of our wants also. And children need to realize that they need a plan for their finances and for their life. We can't elaborate on that. But look at this chart that's in your handout. And I have it divided up into 4 columns. Now, you hear a lot about, I can't talk and spell, so. You hear it, and sometimes I can't spell period. But you hear a lot about needs and wants. But honestly, I think in America, we need to look at it a little closer because we have become an entitlement nation. Entitlements. Some of the things that when I was growing up were only wants, today are entitlements. It's just a fact. Now, I believe we have to accept the economy and the situation we're in. I understand that. And we don't want to get so far out of the norm that our children think we're so extreme that they're not going to adopt what we do. There's some cautions there too. You can go too far, and your children are looking around at everybody else and everything else, and they're looking at other good, godly people, and they're saying, "Now wait a minute." And that's in many areas of life, how we handle it. But so we have necessities, needs, wants, and entitlements. Now, for sake of time, since normally I would take a long time on this, and we just don't have that today, can you? Can you give me some things that you think have gone from wants to entitlements in our society? Can you just real quickly, just in general, what are some things that we go from wants? What are some things that people think they're entitled to that really should be under the column of wants? Yeah, well, sometimes, free phones, but also, let's say, the latest phone. Since I'm not a technology person, I wouldn't know what to call them. I do have a smartphone. They tell me it's smarter than I am, so I guess it is. But the latest phone. What else? What's an area that, wow, is so rampant in America, and inflation might have curbed some of that?
Latest television, big TVs.
Let's say cable. Yeah, big TVs. What's another area? Newer cars, yeah. Bigger cars. A car really should just be transportation unless you can afford more. I'm not opposed to having a car if they can afford it, if a person can afford it. But newer cars, what about eating out? Well, you know what Dave Ramsey says about that, don't you? That's right. If you can afford it to eat out, but even then you should be careful, because why would you want to eat after retirement? But eating out, but if you are not able, if you're in debt if you're in debt, he says the only, here I'm walking around, you're going to find me. I can't hardly speak and not walk. But if you're in debt, the only reason anybody should find you in a restaurant is if you work there. That's what Dave Ramsey says. That's a good thing to go by. But like you said, rice and beans, beans and rice. I have some grandchildren that love beans and rice, so it works well for them. But at any rate, you see what I'm saying. We could think of all. Now, the reason I divide these two is necessities. I have an example that one of our daughters needed shoes really, really bad. I mean, they looked bad. Her mom and I were more embarrassed about them than she was. But we also didn't have money, barely enough money to buy groceries. So normally it wouldn't be a problem at all to put shoes underneath, wouldn't you think? But we had to put it under. We had actually to put shoes under necessities. But we had to downgrade it to needs that we were going to work on because groceries were more important than our shoes. Now, why do I give extreme examples? To make us think. Make us think. Because Americans don't know how to handle a crisis. They panic. Now, people like Mrs. Parker and I grew up in a day, and maybe some of you others, we grew up in a day where you knew how to handle it. Because you didn't have it.
They're looking at the wrong Mrs. Parker.
I'm
old, but I'm not that old.
No, I've had Grandma Parker. I thought I was looking good. Anyway. So you know, this is very important. You're smart ladies, I'm sure. You can go home, sit down with your spouse, if you have a spouse, and make columns like this, where you have it on the sheet, and you can think about things. Is this really a need? Is it really a want? What is it? Because when it comes to budget time, when it comes to paying off debt, you have to be able to do this. And try to do it before you absolutely in such a dire situation that you have to do it. But so then you look on your sheet, tools that execute your plan. You see the box? Now, I don't get credit for the box. I came up with this, but the box was Brother Tim Meyer. Some of you know Brother Tim Meyer. They used to be members here. He used this in the financial workshop my wife attended. This box is God's supply. This is what God supplies. This is the money and resources that you have. That's what that box represents. You have to fit your needs in the box. So what that means is, credit card? No. It's not the way you fit your needs in the box. Debt of any kind? No. That's not the way you fit your needs in the box. Say, some people are already in debt, okay? Well, you start working on paying that debt down. And you've got to become more frugal or whatever it takes. You've got to figure out a way. Now, I knew someone one time that was living with their parents. And they didn't want to count that as their resource. I said, well, it is your resource. Right now, that's what your box is. You're living with your parents. You don't have the money to move out. That's part of your resources. That's part of what God has supplied. And sometimes we get ourselves into bad situations, but we have to realize that that's where we are, so there's no other way out. You know, there's not an alternative to these things that I'm explaining to you today. There's no alternative. And people that think there's an alternative, that's the way they get in trouble. Because there is no alternative. It is what it is. And again, let me reiterate, every single financial advisor will tell you that. Any reputable person that understands finances will tell you the same things. Go ahead and Google it. I dare you. Google it. And you'll find the same information everywhere. The reason I give you these charts in this chart box in your handout is so that you can use that as a way to plan. Now, I knew I wouldn't get to the budget, and I told Chris Mara that, but I handed out some things about a budget and a copy of a budget. Also, I handed out some quotes. I just happened to have papers turned in from some of our freshman college students in the class I'm teaching, and I just thought I'd put those quotes in there. But these are freshmen. Most of these are 18 and 19-year-old kids, and it was refreshing to hear some of the comments from them that they're grasping. They have grasped. Obviously, their parents helped them in that area. Some of the tips on teaching your children, you see those on the page there. Manage your lifestyle, eat out less, but plan it strategically so the whole family enjoys it. Make it a treatment. Make it a treat and not an entitlement. I look at my grandchildren and I think things that used to really excite my children, they don't excite my grandchildren because they get to do them all the time. I say, how do you excite these kids? Because they get to do everything. When my children were growing up, we didn't do all that stuff. If we ate out, it was a huge deal. As a matter of fact, if my wife brought home a carton of Cokes, that was back when they were in the little cartons with the glass bottles, if she brought that home, it was woo! Everybody was excited, including me. So you the more you do of something, the less exciting it becomes. So there are a lot of tips here to think about. Just common sense things, and just to really get you thinking. Don't just limit yourself to these things. It gets you to thinking. So you have a budget sheet there somewhere. I don't have mine here for some reason. Here it is. This is something maybe sometime in the future we could have a workshop. I was talking to Chris Mara about that, and we could go over these things bit by bit. Now, I'll tell you what, it is difficult in this day of prices and inflation to make a budget. It is tough, unless you happen to have a higher than average income. And some of you may have a below or a lower than average income. And so it is really difficult. I will give you that. But there are a lot of things that we could discuss if we had time that we don't have on this budget. I hope you'll take this, study it. If you have some questions, please just email me and I'll try to answer them for you. The reason we use this is a very old one. I'm thinking about updating one, but Larry Burkett did this years ago. So some of these things sound a little funny maybe, but years ago he did this. Larry Burkett's been in heaven for a number of years. But it has so many items on this, the reason I use this one, because it keys your thinking of what you might spend. And I want to update it and ask my wife to type up a new one that'll be a little more pertinent to today. But this gives you ideas of categories. And I stuck into some percentages that I got from both Dave Ramsey and Larry Burkett. And there's a range because every situation it can be different. But it gives you an idea of a guide to go by. So that's about all I can do in this amount of time. I really appreciate your attention and am glad to answer any questions. I'll be around here a while. I don't know what comes next year, but if anybody has